Begin today the Gemara on Daf Ayin Tes Amud Aleph, 11 or 12 lines down from the top of the Yamud. The Gemara quotes what it said in the Mishnah, Machar Ashpa, Machar Zivla. If a person is selling an area where the garbage is kept, so the zevel, the fertilizer that is also put there, it's zevel from the animals, but it could be used as fertilizer, it's sold along with it. And the Mishnah says similar, if you sell a pit, the water that's inside is included in the sale. You sell a kaveres, a beehive, the bees are also included, and a dovkat, the doves are included as well. Okay, the Gemara here is going to bring a Mishnah that discusses halachas of me'ilah, and there's different arguments about this halacha of me'ilah, and then at the end of the whole sugya, it'll come back and bring from our Mishnah and show how there's actually a Tana that argues with what it said in our Mishnah. Tanan Hasam, we learned there in Masechta Me'ilah. Kol aroy lemizbeach, anything that a person dedicates to hektish, and it can be brought as a carbon on the mizbeach. That's different types of animals. It could also be different birds, even wine or oil, and different things that could be brought on the mizbeach. That's one level of hektish. It's the highest level of hektish because it can be brought in the mizbeach. And v'leilu bedek habayis, and then it's not something that's used for the bedek habayis, which is for any part of the structure of the construction of the Beis Hamikdash. It's not used in as any building material. It's just something that could be brought as a carbon. Or if you will makdish something and it's the opposite, lebedek habayis, it's something that can be used for building v'leilu mizbeach. It can't be used for the mizbeach. For example, gold, silver, other precious gems and things like that are needed in the Beis Hamikdash. Or even if it's something that's leilu mizbeach, v'leilu bedek habayis. It's something that can't be brought as a carbon on the mizbeach, and it also can't be used as building materials. It's just assets that the Bezdin owns, and what do they do with it? Or the hektish owns, and they sell it for the money, for the value. So really, the Rashbam gives the example like milk, cheese, or any other grass, or things like that a person is makdish that cannot be used for anything for hektish. So the halacha is mayalin bahem. The halacha of me'ilah, when a person misappropriates hektish, applies to it. Ubameshe b'toichan, and also what's inside of it, as it'll bring here the example now, similar to what we learned in our Mishnah, when you have something and what it contains inside of it. The reason why the Mishnah begins with these different types of levels of hektish is because what it's saying is that not only the highest level of hektish, which is something that's on the mizbeach, but even a lesser level of hektish, which belongs to bedek habayis, and even a lesser level of hektish, where it's just basically the value, the money of it, which is hektish, but the item itself is not really used by hektish. By all of them, the halacha of me'ilah applies. So what does it mean that the me'ilah is for what you will makdish and including what it contains inside? Keitzad, what does this refer to? Hikdish bar malei mayim. You were makdish a pit, and the pit was full of water. Or ashpais malei zevel, an area where the garbage is, and it was full of the zevel, the fertilizer. Or shoivach malei yainim, a dovekat, and the birds, the doves are inside. Or sadeh malei asavim, a field, and it's full of grass. Elon nasi peiris, a tree that has fruits that are growing on it. Even though you will only makdish the pit or the dovekat, not the contents of it, but because when you will makdish it, the contents were inside of it, it's included in the hektish, and you're going to be mayil in it and what's inside of it. Aval hikdish boir, if you will makdish a pit, and when you were makdish, there was no water there. Later, it was filled with water. Or ashpa, a garbage dump, and later it got filled with the fertilizer. Or shayvich, the dovkat, and later doves come to live in it. Or ilon, a tree, and the fruits grew on the tree later. Or sada, a field, later the grass grew there. So then, the Tanakama says, Rabbi Yehuda says, ma'ilim behem, ve'em ma'ilim b'masha b'toichan. The me'ilah is what you will makdish, but then the contents that came in later on, the me'ilah does not apply to that. Divrei Rabbi Yehuda. This is Rabbi Yehuda's opinion. Rabbi Yosi Yomer, however, Rabbi Yosi says, hamakdish asada, a person that is makdish a field, or vesa ilon, or a tree, and then the field grows grass and the trees grow fruits, ma'ilim behen ubigduleim. Over here, even though the grass or the fruits came later, it now is part of the hektish, and the me'ilah will be also on what grew here. And the reason is mipnei shein gidule hektish. It's because it's growing from the hektish. In other words, there's a difference between the water that comes later into the pit, that it gets filled with the water, and a tree that the fruits are actually growing, taking nourishment from the tree itself, the grass that are growing from the field itself. So Rabbi Yosi holds that gidule hektish, what grows from hektish, is also hektish. Rabbi Yehuda holds it's not that way. What grew from it is not part of the hektish. It's being caused, it's coming from the hektish, but it's not part of the hektish, and therefore you're not moil on this.
So you also don't know the cases.
Right. Rabbi Yossi is only arguing on the case of the grass and the fruits that grow from the field or that grows from the trees. So now on this, Tanya, we learned in a Braise, Omar Rabbi said, Nirin, Divrei Rabbi Yehuda, Bebar V'Shoivech. I agree to the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda regarding a pit or a dovecat that you were makdish it when it was empty and then it got filled with water or it got filled with the doves, that they are not going to be hektish. And v'divrei Rabbi Yossi, and it appears, as Rabbi Yossi says, I agree to Rabbi Yossi, b'sada v'ilon. When it comes to a field that grass grow on it later or trees that grow fruits, that will be hektish. That's what Rabbi said. So the Gemara here clarifies the statement of Rabbi. Hi, Mai, what was Rabbi saying here? It's understood when he says, Nid in Divrei Rabbi Yehuda bebar v'shoivech, that I agree to Rabbi Yehuda only regarding the case of the pit and the dovecat, when the water and the doves are added later, Miklal, the Polig Asada v'ilon. That really Rabbi Yehuda argues not only regarding Boyer and Shoivech, he argues also regarding a field and a tree, that there, even when the tree grows grass, the field grows grass and the tree grows fruits, Rabbi Yehuda holds even in those cases, what grows will not be hektish. So Rabbi is saying, even though Rabbi Yehuda holds in all these cases that it won't be hektish, but I agree to Rabbi Yehuda only regarding the Boyer and the Shoivech. So that makes sense why he's saying this. Elo nir in divrei Rabbi Yossi b'sada v'ilon. When he says that I agree to Rabbi Yossi when it comes to a field and when it comes to a tree that grow grass and fruits, Meklal, the polig bebar v'shoivech, what is he implying by saying this? Is he saying, even though Rabbi Yossi argued on all cases, I agree to Rabbi Yossi only regarding the case of the field and the tree? But that's not true. Rabbi Yossi sada v'ilon kama. Rabbi Yossi himself only argued regarding the case of the field and the tree. He wasn't arguing regarding the other cases. Over there he agrees that since it doesn't grow, the water doesn't grow from the pit, it's not going to be hektish. Now says the Gemara, maybe we could say that Rabbi Yossi actually did argue on all cases. If you'll argue and say, L'dvarav the Rabbi Yehuda Kamar. When Rabbi Yehuda, when Rabbi Yossi that is arguing on Rabbi Yehuda only regarding the field and the tree, he wasn't saying his own opinion. He was telling Rabbi Yehuda, at least regarding the field and the tree, you should agree to me that once it grows, it's hektish. Even if you disagree regarding the bayir and the water, when the water that's in the bayir is not growing from the bayir. So he's only telling this to Rabbi Yehuda, but he himself, Rabbi Yossi himself, actually holds that by all of it, when the water is filled up later, then it's going to become hektish as well. But the Gemara says it's not true. Rabbi Yossi did not argue regarding all cases. He only argued regarding the field and the tree. Because Vatanya, we learned in the Braise, Rabbi Yossi said, Ein ani roye divrei, or dvarav shel Rabbi Yehuda, b'sada v'ilon. I don't see that it's right, like Rabbi Yehuda said, regarding a field and a tree. Why? Mipnei shehen gidule hektish. He explains his reasoning. He says, because this grows from hektish, so therefore it's going to be hektish. So we clearly see b'sada v'ilan hu de'ene roya. He's clearly saying that in this details, only regarding the field and the tree, here's where I don't agree to Rabbi Yehuda. But regarding a pit that fills up with water later, or a shoivech that fills up with doves later, so there he agrees to Rabbi Yehuda that they will not become hektish. So the question is on Rabbi. What was Rabbi saying when he says that I agree to Rabbi Yossi only regarding the detail of the field and the trees? That's all Rabbi Yossi said. He didn't say anything else. He didn't disagree on anything else. So the Gemara says, this is how you have to understand what Rebbe was saying, and you have to read what the statement of Rebbe was said differently. Nirin divrei Rabbi Yehuda li Rabbi Yossi bebar v'shoivech. I agree to what Rabbi Yehuda says to Rabbi Yossi regarding the case of the pit that fills up later, and regarding the dovecat that fills up later. Why? Sha'af Rabbi Yossi loy nachlakov, because even Rabbi Yossi himself did not argue on him. Ela b'sada v'ilan. He only argued regarding the field and the tree. But when it comes to the pit and the dovecat, there he agrees to him. So therefore, if they're not arguing, so therefore that is going to be the halacha regarding the boyer and the shoivech. So that's the machloikis over here between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yossi. So over here, according to what we learned in this Braise, when it comes to a pit that fills up with water and anything similar to that it's not growing from the thing itself, everybody agrees that whatever contents it gets filled up with later is not going to be hektish. But now here in the continuation, the Gemara is going to bring other Braises that discuss this. that there is actually an opinion that even by such a case of boyer and shevach that fills up later, the contents that it gets filled up with later will be hektish. Tan Rabbanon, we learned in another brayse, hekdishon reikonen. You makdish something that's empty, and then it filled up later. Ma'ilim behem, so the me'ila is only in what you were makdish in the beginning, but ve'im ma'ilim b'masha b'toichan, the contents that it got filled up with later, for that there's no me'ila. Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon argues and says, af ma'ilim b'masha b'toichan. The me'ila will be with what it filled up later as well. So now what is the case that this brayse is talking about? So Rabbi says, Machlaikis b'sada v'ilon. The machlaikis here is similar to the argument before between Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Yehuda. They're arguing only about a tree that grew grass later, and a tree, a field that grew grass later, and a tree that grew fruits later. The Tanakama Savalak Rabbi Yehuda. The Tanakama here holds like Rabbi Yehuda that even in such a case there is no hektish for gidule hektish, even though it's growing from the field and from the tree, there is no mi'ilah on what grows later. But Rabbi Shimon Savalak Rabbi Yossi, and Rabbi Shimon holds like Rabbi Yossi because it's growing from the hektish. Gidule hektish is hektish. Aval be'boyer b'shoivech. But if it was a pit or a dovkat that gets filled up later, everybody agrees that there's me'ila in the actual pit itself or the dovkat itself, but not with any contents that was inside of it, because that comes later. That's the first pshat the Gemara says in this. But on this, Abaye asks on this pshat, the Elo, the Tanya, we have a second brayse where the same Tanoim argued. So the Brayse says that what's if the case was Hikdishon Melayan? He was makdish something and it was full already. When he was makdish it was full already with its contents. So then Ma'ilim ben b'masha b'toichan. So the Tanakama says that the Me'ilah will be in everything because when you were makdish it was already full. But Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon machlif. But here Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon switches his opinion. Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Shimon was before, in the previous brayse here, he was the one that was machmer, and he said that when you are makdish something that's empty, and it gets filled up later, that you're mayil even with what it got filled up later. Here, which is a big pele, here Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Shimon says, when you makdish something that's already full, you're only going to be mayil in the thing itself and not in its contents. So that's the machlif that Rashbam says that Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Shimon uses the term machlif, that he switches his opinion because this is a big chiddush here. So now the Gemara asks on this, how could Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Shimon hold this? Now what are we talking about over here? V'i besada v'ilon. If what we're talking about is a tree or a field that has fruits on it and has grass that is growing on it, am I machlif? Why would he switch his opinion? So the Rashbam explains, if you're makdish a tree, that when you makdish a tree, it has fruits on it, for sure it should be hektish. How could Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Shimon say that in such a case, only the tree is hektish, but the fruits are not hektish? Why should the fruits not be hektish? The fruits grow from the tree, and the fruits are already there when you makdish it. So definitely it should be hektish. So therefore the Gemara now says a different shot. Elam Rabbe, so Rabbe said a different shot in the machlokes here between the Tanakama and Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Shimon. In this brayse here, it's not the same argument as Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yossi that we brought before regarding the boyer and the shevach, when it fills with contents later and it doesn't grow from the boyer, it doesn't grow from the shevach, whether that will be hektish. They actually, over here, the argument is different. Machlaikes b'boyer v'shevach. The argument in these two brayses between the Tanakama and Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Shimon is actually regarding a pit and a dovkat, when it gets filled later with its contents, or when it was full when you were makdish it as well. They argue in both cases. We have two brayses here. Aval b'sada v'ilan, when it comes to a field and a tree, divrei hakayim ma'ilin behen u'b'mesha b'toichan. In this case, everybody will agree that the me'ilah will be on the tree itself, and also the fruits that grow later or the grass that grows later. There, everybody agrees to what Rabbi Yossi says. Okay, so now the Gemara explains what is the machlokes here. Now, when it comes to a pit and to this dovkat, so we have two brayses. The first brayse was bereikonen, that when you were makdish it was empty and it got filled later. So the Tanakama says that you're not moil in its contents that came later. And there, Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Shimon says that you are moil in the water or the doves that came later. So b'mai pligi, how do we explain that machlokes in the first brayse here? And then ubimalayin b'mai pligi. Then in the next brayse, the argument between the Tanakama and Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Shimon, when you will makdish it full, you will makdish a bar full with water, you will makdish a shevach full with water. Over here as well, there's an argument, and here Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Shimon is actually the one that says the opposite. That when it's full with water, you're not going to be moil in the water. What is the understanding of that argument? So the Gemara explains. The argument when you're makdish a pit that was empty and it gets filled with water later, whether you're going to be moil in the water that comes later or not, the plukte the Rab Meir v'Rabbanan. They're arguing in the argument that there is between Rab Meir and the Rabbanan regarding the ability of being makdish something or selling something that's not even here yet. The Tanakama Savala, the Tanakama holds Karabanan. Holds like the Rabbanan's opinion, the Amri, a person could never sell something that is not here yet, that he doesn't have in his possession yet. So over here as well, when you're makdish the pit and there's no water in the pit yet, so the water that comes later, you don't have the ability to be makdish that. So the water that it gets filled up with later is not part of the hektish. So you're not going to be moil in that. Rab Lazar Rab Shimon Sava Rab Meir. Rab Lazar Rab Shimon holds like Rab Meir, the Omar, Odom Makne, Dovar Shaloi Bal. A person is able to be makna something, you're able to sell something that you don't even have yet. That's not here yet. So here as well, when you're makdish the pit and the water comes in later, so that water is also included in the hektish. That's why he says even when it was empty, it's going to be hektish.
Even though it doesn't get any source from the hektish.
Correct, even though it doesn't come from it itself, but nevertheless, he's makdish it with the water that's going to come later. Now the Gemara asks on this, what is this concept that a person could sell something or could be makdish something that he doesn't even have yet? And Rab Meir holds the person has the ability to do that. How? Why do you have the ability to be makdish something that you don't even have yet at all? So the Gemara asks, when did we hear this concept that Rab Meir says such a thing? That you could sell something that you don't even have yet. That's actually only kugoin peres dekel davidid also. That's only if you're selling a tree. And the tree doesn't have the fruits on it yet. And the fruits are going to grow later. But because the fruits naturally grow from the tree, it's eventually, it's going to be growing. So therefore, even though the fruits are not actually there yet, the fruits are included in the hektish, or the fruits are included in the sale. That you could say. But Hani, over here, the cases that you're saying that they're arguing about on this brisa, whether a pit that gets filled with water later, or a dovkat that gets filled with the birds that come into it later, mi asu. Who says they're ever going to come here? So that kind of dava shaloi bala ilam that's not here now, and you don't know if it's ever going to come. It's not something naturally that's going to happen and come. In such a case, even Rab Meir would agree you can't be makdish or sell something like this that's not here at all. So how could we say that this is the basis of the opinion of Rab Lazar Rab Shimon that in such a case it'll be hektish as well? Now, the Rashbam here and Taisus is a big discussion here about the source of where Rab Meir said this. And the Rashbam brings that we learned this in the Gemara in Gittin, that the place where Rab Meir says this is when a person goes over to a woman and says, I'm going to marry you when I become a ger, or I'm going to marry you when I'll be freed from my master. He's now an Eved, he's an Eved Kanani, and he says, I'm going to marry you when I get freed. So in that case, Rab Meir holds that the Kedushin takes effect. Even though it's loy bal olam, he's not even a Yid yet, he doesn't have the ability to marry her. So the question is, how could the Gemara here say that Rab Meir was only speaking about a case of the fruits of a tree that are naturally going to come? To be a ger or to be freed by the master is something that doesn't happen naturally. So the Rashbam answers, in the case of the gators, we're talking about a person that's in the process of becoming a ger. That's his plan. That's what he's going to be doing. It's just an eventuality to finish the process. And beneged to the person being freed from his master, it's talking about a case where the master promised him, I'm freeing you. And it's just a matter of getting things together to actually free him. So over there, it's also an eventuality. You know that it's going to happen. That's the Rashbam's prat. Tosfos says, and one of the pshatim Tosfos says is that in the case that Rab Meir is talking about, even though the person is not free yet or he's not a ger yet, but the person himself is here. The body of the person that he says, I'm going to be Mekadesh you when I'm a Yid, his body is here. True, he's not yet a Yid, but the goof of the person is here already. Here, though, we're talking about a pit that water comes into it later. The water is not here yet, and there's nothing naturally that's going to develop to say that the water will come here. So why should that be included in a sale or in the hektish? So the Gemara answers, Omar Rave, so Rav explains, what's the case here? Mishkachas lo b'mayim haboim derech hatzere. We're talking actually here about a pit where there's the water that flows on a slope, and the water goes down into the pit, so it is natural for the water to fill the pit. You know that the water is going to come there. Now it didn't rain for a while, and it gets emptied, but as soon as it rains, the water is going to flow into this pit. And similar by the dovkat, v'yainim habon derech sheivcha l'sheivich, that this is a dovkat that's not itself, and there's a lot of doves in the area, there's other dovkats in the area, so it's an eventuality that this dovkat is going to get filled with these birds. That's the explanation of the argument when you were makdish it empty and then it filled up. Whether you hold like Rab Meir that because it's eventually going to fill up, do I say that it's included in the hektish or not? Now, what's the argument in the second braise? Ubemaleim b'mai pligi. When you makdish a pit that's full of water, what's the argument here? Here, Rab Elazar Rab Shimon actually holds the opposite. That even though it's full of water, it's only the bird that's going to be hektish, but not the water. Amar Rave, so Rave says, or another gear says, Rabbe, kogoyin shehiktish boyer stam. This person was actually makdish only the boyer. He didn't come and say, I'm being makdish the boyer and the water. The person was makdish, he says, I'm being makdish this boyer. And he didn't spell out what's included in this. Rabbi Elazar Rab Shimon, Savala Kavua. Rabbi Elazar Rab Shimon holds like his father, Rab Shimon, the Omar, we learned this in the previous Perek here, he holds that Donin din Gavaya midin hedyet. We compare hektish to the halacha of by a hedyet when you just sell something. So now, this wasn't the Gemara before, we had a big arichas about this. The Gemara there speaks about, if you remember, when a person sells something, whether a person sells something ba'ayin yofa, generously, or a person sells something ba'ayin ra, a person sells something and he's doing it in a stingy manner, he only wants to sell the minimum of what he's getting paid for. According to Rab Shimon, a person that's makdish has the same attitude like when he's selling something, ba'ayin ra. Okay, so here the Gemara says, how does that apply in our case? Ma din hedyet, just like it is with the case of a hedyet. Motzi Omar, the seller could say, if a person says, I'm selling you a pit, and he didn't spell out what's included, even though it's full of water when he's selling it, he could say, but no, I only meant to sell you the pit, but the water that's inside the pit, I did not sell. Av din gavoya, same thing also when it comes to hektish, bira aktish, maya loy aktish. The boyer I sold, but again, the boyer I was makdish, that is, but the water I was not makdish. That's the explanation of Rab Elazar Rab Shimon, why he says even when it's full with water, but the water is not included in the hektish, because he didn't say that. He said bar stam, so then the water is not going to be included in this. Okay, let's skip the parentheses for now. I'll come back to it maybe soon, but according to the Marshal, you're not good. Here. So the Gemara asks on this, wait a minute, this whole thing is not true l'chayre. This goes back now to what it said in the Mishnah, Vidin hedyet. Now, when a person is selling a pit, stam, and it's full with water, isn't the water included in that sale? Vidin hedyet loy, are you saying that by the hedyet, the water will not be included in the sale when you sell a pit? But vatnan, didn't we learn in the Mishnah, macha boy, macha meimov. If a person sells this pit, stam, and he doesn't say that I'm including the water, but if it's full with water, the water is included. So how could, right?
What's the pit without water?
Yeah, okay. So the same thing, similar, the Gemara said regarding the pit in the water, regarding the garbage dump with the zevel in it, all these things, the contents are included. So the Gemara answers that it's actually a machlekes tanaim, as we see in the Braisa. Amar Rave, so Rave says, masnisin yichidahi. The Mishnah is actually only the opinion of one Tana. The Tanya, as we learned in the Braisa, macha boy, when a person sells the pit, loy machar meimov, the waters that are inside of it is not sold. So you're asking what a person can do with this pit. If a person has a pit and the water is not his, he can rent it out. He can rent out this pit and charge people that want to store their water there. So he can use it. It's he's not drinking the water from there, but it's a certain asset that he could use. So therefore, the water is not included. So over here, Rab Elazar Rab Shimon in this Braisa is like the Tanakama of this Braisa here that says that the water, when you sell a pit, the water is not included. And similar by hektish, when you makdish, the water is not included. Rab Nassan, however, Rab Nassan says, macha boyer, macha meimov. When a person sells a pit, like it said in our Mishnah, the water will be included. So our Mishnah is following the opinion of Rab Nassan. So now going back here to the Tanakama of the Braisa, when a person is makdish, so what is it? Why does the Tanakama argue on Rab Elazar Rab Shimon? So you have what it says here in the Gemara in the parentheses. V'Tanakama savar ein donen din gavoya midin hedyet. The Tanakama holds you can't compare selling to being makdish. Even if when a person sells, we say that he's selling ba'ayin ra, that he's stingy, and he's only selling the pit and not the contents, the water. But when it comes to hektish, a person wants to be makdish at all. That's one shot. But Rashbam says you could also say differently, that the Tanakama here held like Rab Nassan. that even by hetyet, when you sell water, when you sell a pit, that is, the water is included, and hektish is no different, that the water will be included. Okay, so you see here, the Gemara brought this whole thing about hektish just to, here for the connection to the Mishnah, and this last point of it, the Gemara points out that this is a machlekes.